Okay, we're live. We're just going to check the live stream to make sure it's up and running. Live look good. Sergeants, will you begin?
Computer recording started.
Cloud recording rolling.
Backup is rolling.
Sergeant Sadowski, you begin.
Good morning, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Technology. At this time, would all council members and council staff please turn on their video? To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent mode. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you, Chair Holden. We are ready to begin.
Thank you, Sergeant. Good morning. I am Councilmember Robert Holden, the Chair of the Committee on Technology, and I would like to welcome you all to our hearing today on open data compliance. We will discuss how the city can leverage open data to improve city agencies and how those agencies respond to the needs of our fellow New Yorkers. We'll review the open data law, the 2021 open data plan, and several amendments that were passed by this committee over the past few years. New York City Open Data is one of the first open data programs in the nation, officially enshrined in the city's operations since the signing of the Open Data Law of 2012. Its supervising agency, the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, was established by executive order in 2013 and codified into the city charter in 2018. Since that time, New York City Open Data has proved itself a leader in the field of data science and data analytics, providing thousands of data sets that have been used to better understand our great city. Open data is an important step in government transparency and accountability and allows for innovation, efficiency, and economic growth. 2021 saw more than 400 data sets published by over 60 different city agencies of New York City Open Data, as well as more than 900,000 downloads and 2.6 million API calls. Clearly, New York City Open Data and the Open Data Portal are valuable tools that are being used to understand how government functions. Our 311 system has made significant improvements the past 4 years, and the data we get through 311 system allows us to see our constituents' concerns being addressed. And oftentimes we see agencies need to be more responsive. 311 data service calls receives the most views on the portal, and that's to be expected. The public, of course, is interested in how their complaints are being handled. So today, the committee will discuss the implementation of open data laws, the challenges that have arisen, the ongoing issues, and the ways we can work together with the administration to solve both administratively and legislatively. We held a hearing in 2018 on this subject, so it will be helpful to see what progress has been made the past few years and what challenges are still faced in the open data portal. I look forward to hearing from the panels today, and I'd like to thank the Technology Committee staff, Council Irene Bahovsky and Policy Analyst Charles Kim, as well as especially I'd like to mention the data team for their help in putting together this hearing. I would like to recognize my fellow council members, Councilmember Paul Vallone and Councilmember Kalman Yeager. And is anybody else? I don't see anybody else at this point. I will now turn it over to Committee Counsel Irene Bahovsky to go over procedures for the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Holden. I'm Irene Bahovsky, the counsel to the Committee on Technology, and I will be moderating this hearing. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you're called on to testify, at which point you will be unmuted by the host. Please be aware that there could be a delay in muting and unmuting, so please be patient. I will be calling on panelists when I will be calling panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called as I will announce panelists. We will first be hearing testimony from the administration, followed by testimony from members of the public. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask questions of the administration or specific panelists, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes, which includes the time it will take to answer questions. Also, please note that all panelists, aside from those from the administration, will be limited to a 5-minute timer. So we might accommodate all who are registered to testify today. I will now call representatives of the administration to testify. We will be hearing testimonies from Martha Norik, Chief Analytics Officer and Director of the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, and Evan Levine, Chief Data Science Officer of DoIT. We also have Zachary Weber, Open Data Program Officer of MODA, and Albert Weber, Director of Open Data from DoIT. All of those panelists will be available for questions. At this time, I will administer the affirmation of each representative. I will call on each of you individually for response, so please raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before the committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Martha Nordink?
Yes.
Thank you. Albert Weber?
Yes.
Zachary Fetter?
Yes.
Evan Levine?
Yes.
Thank you. I now invite administration to present their testimony. You might begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Holden and council members. My name is Martha Norris. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer of New York City, the Director of the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, or MODA for short, and most relevantly today, the city's Chief Open Platform Officer. I'm joined today by Zachary Fader, the Open Data Program Manager at MODA, Albert Weber, the Director of Open Data at the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications, or DoIT, and Evan Levine, DoIT's Chief Data Science Officer. We're excited to be here today to discuss the work that has been done to fulfill the requirements of the city's open data law and the progress made towards connecting New Yorkers with the data that runs their city. On behalf of the administration, I'd like to thank this committee for its interest in and support of the Open Data Program. I'd like to begin by describing the structure of the city's Open Data Program. I want to particularly emphasize that NYC Open Data is a team effort. My office, MODA, serves as the business owner of the program, working to promote the use of open data both within government and among New Yorkers, and to spearhead efforts to make the city's open data more usable and useful. This work is more than a legal mandate for us. Open data is the easiest way for city agencies to access each other's data and often serves as the main source of data for our office's analytics projects. Since 2019, we've worked to increase the footprint of open data in our office with the hiring of both an open data program manager and a project manager who focuses on open data. Our partners at DoIT are the technical owners of the program, working with city agencies to identify and make data available and coordinating platform operations and improvements. With these complementary roles, the MODA and DoIT staff who work on open data collectively comprise the open data team. The Open Data team convenes a network of Open Data Coordinators, or ODCs for short, approximately 100 in total from each city agency and office. ODCs serve as the point of contact for our team, and they work to identify, structure, document, manage, and communicate about their agency's public data sets. Nearly all of these Open Data Coordinators have other responsibilities in addition to serving as their agency's ODC, and they need to work with agency colleagues across information technology, data analytics, and legal roles to fulfill their duties. A top priority for the Open Data Program has been to support agencies with better tools, more resources, clearer standards, and stronger connections to accomplish their work. To this end, the Open Data team has led annual training sessions, held regular office hours, and work to connect ODCs who are newer to the role with veterans of the position to share best practices. The annual compliance process laid out in the Open Data Law serves as an important foundation for the work of ODCs to identify new data sets. Since we last spoke to this committee in 2018, the Open Data team has made improvements to this process, going above and beyond what is mandated by law to help identify more agency data assets and set higher standards for those data sets in NYC Open Data. In particular, ODCs are now required to identify data shared with the public through their agency's websites as a part of the annual compliance process. This list is used to find new public data sets for NYC Open Data and is of course shared publicly in an open data set. The Open Data team has begun working with agencies to create clearer documentation guidelines and a more comprehensive data quality assurance process. And we have released a revamped Open Data dashboard that allows agencies and any member of the public to see the information that the Open Data team is using to assess the health of the program. Due in part to these improvements, in our 2021 reporting period, 425 new data sets were published by 66 different agencies, and nearly 400 data sets were identified as being shared through agency websites. While making city data accessible to the public, available to the public is an important first step, our ultimate goal is to make sure that this information is accessible. That means encouraging agency staff to engage with the public around open data, supporting New Yorkers who use open data, and fostering communities of sharing, learning, and teaching around open data. The Open Data team manages a help desk service where anyone can ask a question about a data set, suggest an improvement, or request a new data set for publication. We receive more than 1,000 help desk inquiries each year and work with agencies to triage and respond to these messages. Since 2017, MODA, along with civic technology nonprofit Beta NYC, has hosted NYC Open Data Week, which is a week-long festival of community-driven events to celebrate open data as a free public resource for and about New York City. Events are selected to appeal to a broad swath of New Yorkers and range from workshops, demos, and tutorials to open data scavenger hunts, discussion panels, data arts and crafts, and the Data Through Design art exhibition. City staff also hold sessions to explain their agency's data, the work they do with it, and how others might use it. This March, a virtual Open Data Week had a record of more than 3,600 attendees across 150 events, including more than a dozen from city agencies and offices. Even as the ranks of open data coordinators grow and more New Yorkers are attending Open Data Week events, we recognize that we need to continue to find new ways to share open data with New Yorkers and scale up our outreach. In collaboration with Beta NYC, we are currently in the process of launching the Open Data Ambassadors Program, which will recruit, train, and certify volunteer ambassadors to teach New Yorkers about open data and how to use it. The first cohort of ambassadors will include city agency staff, library professionals, and members of the New York City's vibrant civic technology community. These ambassadors will start leading classes through libraries and civic organizations early next year. This program builds on pilot efforts in 2019 and early 2020 at libraries throughout Queens and virtual classes held during Open Data Week 2021. The work on NYC Open Data during the de Blasio administration has been motivated by the vision of open data for all, that every New Yorker should have access to public data that is used to help run their city. Many of the initiatives we have mentioned today are the direct result of input from New Yorkers that we received during the creation of our 10-year strategic plan in 2019. To create this plan, the Open Data team conducted surveys, held interviews, and convened a 2-day co-design workshop with civic tech advocates and open data enthusiasts to better understand their information needs and to prioritize key initiatives for the Open Data program. As we continue our work to accomplish this vision, we are proud to say that more people are using NYC Open Data than ever. Last fiscal year, data sets were automatically accessed via API more than 2.6 million times, and data sets were manually downloaded nearly 1 million times, a 61% increase and 77% increase from fiscal year 2020, respectively. We look forward to the work ahead to continue to expand and improve the city's open data assets and to connect more New Yorkers with this valuable public resource. I would like to thank the Committee on Technology for the opportunity to testify today. I would also like to thank all of the city staff who work on making NYC Open Data possible, our partners, especially Beta NYC, who organize creative and compelling events during Open Data Week, and everyone who makes use of or shares open data. I would now like to turn it over to my colleague, Albert Weber, to discuss DO-IT's work on NYC Open Data.
Good morning, Chair Holden and members of the Committee of Technology. My name is Albert Weber, and I'm the Director of Open Data for the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications, also known as DO-IT. Joining me today is Evan Levine, DO-IT's Chief Data Science Officer. I am here today to give the committee an update on DO-IT's role in open data, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss the important program, which is a collaborative effort between DO-IT and the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, also known as MODA. The Open Data Portal has come a long way in the last decade plus, starting out as the NYC Data Mine in 2009, a limited resource for programmers and developers, to its now expansive, accessible, and user-friendly iteration. Since the passage of Local Law 11 in 2012, otherwise known as the Open Data Law, all public data sets by New York City agencies have been required to be made available through a single web portal. In our partnership with MODA, we are proud to implement a strong law, not only requiring the publishing of data sets, but also containing robust amendments that keep city agencies and offices accountable to providing up-to-date, accurate, and usable data. Today, the Open Data Portal is maintained by my team at DO-IT. It is currently home to over 3,400 public data assets, including data sets, tables, and maps. Of course, the effort to upkeep existing assets and publish new ones does not occur in a vacuum. It is an all hands on deck, year-round process with MODA and publishing agencies and offices. Each city agency and office is responsible for identifying and making available all public data that they produce, and are also required to annually submit an inventory of public data assets that they have not yet made public, along with the dates they intend to publish them. This inventory, along with other compliance metrics, was published on September 15th of this year as part of the Open Data for All 2021 Progress Report. As my colleague Martha has detailed, there are approximately 100 Open Data Coordinators, also known as ODCs, who are designated subject matter experts and are liaisons to their respective agencies or offices publishing of open data, as required by Local Law 251 of 2017. On the Open Data Portal, there is a data set that lists the ODC for each agency or office. DO-IT and MODA works closely with them throughout the year, providing guidance and assistance on a wide range of topics, including compliance requirements, responses to the public, publishing timelines, identifying public data sets, and automations, just to name a few. In fact, we held a virtual Open Data Coordinator convening yesterday. It is DO-IT and MODA's shared goal to empower ODCs with as much information and support as possible so they may make the most informed decisions about data publishing for their own agency or office. The investment we have made in establishing a community of ODCs has, as Martha noted, improved the compliance process and has also been integral to the city's COVID-19 response. Despite the challenges presented by the pandemic and the city's response to it, the Open Data program has continued its normal course of business, in addition to supporting the publishing of data sets to the Open Data Portal related to COVID-19 and its variants. Additionally, data has been generated as a result of a number of new programs and policies the city has implemented to handle the shift in the city life as a result of the pandemic, including the Department of Transportation's Open Streets locations and maps, and the Department of Parks and Recreation's closure status data sets, to name a few. We have been proud to support these agencies in publishing this data to the Open Data Portal. DO-IT has also worked to implement technical changes to make compliance and publishing easier and more reliable, including improvements to our file drop automation capability, upgrades to our databases, and a number of processing enhancements. Lastly, I'd like to address the Technical Standards Manual, also known as the TSM, the document that details the citywide policies, standards, and guidelines required to support the Open Data Law. This document has not been updated since 2018, but we have been working closely with MODA to update the TSM and provide the requisite public comment period. We hope to be able to share these updates within the coming weeks. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to take council members' questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And now I turn to Chair Holden for questions.
Thank you both for your testimony. I'm going to start some questions. By the way, we've been joined with Council Member Eric Ulrich. And I just have a few questions to start off, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues who may have some questions. But I want to start with my favorite subject, 311 related questions. For 311 data, and this could be either agency, and either agency can join in. Obviously, the 311 data, there is a comment, quote, "This data does not present a full picture of 311 calls or service requests. The city is working to address this issue." How exactly has this affected the data, and is this still an issue?
Thank you
Yes.
for that. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Evan.
Yes, Chair, I can take that question. The pandemic placed unprecedented demands on the operations of 311. And because of the changes that we needed to make to the 311 system to address the increase in call volume, we basically had to change some of the ways that the data flowed around. So because the pandemic obviously is still ongoing, those changes are still necessary, and that's why the message on the data set is still present.
So was that a person, it was just the call volume, or was it also personnel? You lost some personnel, or was it both?
The message doesn't pertain to a loss of personnel or anything like that. It is about the data that is present in that data set.
Okay. So some service requests are resolved as it was a duplicate or previous reported by another, or an open service request already exists. So how does 311 handle and mark these requests? Like, do issues with multiple callers receive priority?
So I would have to defer that question to the agencies that are responding to those, because the 311 obviously the 311 call center's job is to refer those service requests to the responding agency, and they are the ones that prioritize the responses.
Okay. So you mentioned, like, in the testimony, the data dictionary, for service requests hasn't been updated since 2018. So what additional updates are planned? And you mentioned they'll occur soon. Is that do you have a date other than soon, or?
So I'll take the first part of this question,
All right.
and then I'll go over to my colleague Al. So it's the technical standards manual that has not been published since 2018. We acknowledge that we are late, and we apologize for that. As Al said in his testimony, that document is actively being worked, and it is in our internal review process at this point, and we hope to get it up for public review in the coming weeks.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to Al to ask.
Go ahead. All right.
Is going to be new in that document.
Yeah. So with regards to the technical standards manual, one thing that we realized in reviewing it is that it's not the most readable or document. In the spirit of open data for all, what we're looking to do is give a little bit of insight into the process that's going with agency open data coordinators and identifying data sets and sort of what's going on throughout the whole life cycle of an open data set. So in doing that, we think we'll be providing a lot of guidance to our open data coordinators, and at the same time, providing users of open data a transparent view of what's going on behind the scenes.
Okay. Another question on my, we mentioned this at the previous hearing with DeWitt and the commissioner. Filming does not have a 311 category. Why is this? Why doesn't complaints for filming? And certainly we have a lot of the film industry operating in New York City. Why don't we have a separate category for that?
Chair, thank you for that question. I can take that back to the 311 team and get you an answer offline after this year. That's okay.
Yeah, because my team couldn't get the number of complaints about the filming industry, which we get a lot of in my office, because I have a lot of on location filming, and I have a studio and a couple of studios in my district that take up some of the street parking in and around the studio. So yeah, if I mentioned that to the Commissioner Tisch, and she said she would address it, but there's some of these kind of topics or categories that fall through the cracks. So if your agency can get back to us and how, if you're going to create obviously a category, and then we could start collecting data on filming in New York City. All right.
Thank you.
Another problem I'm having, we're trying to address homelessness throughout the city. Do you feel DHS, Department of Homeless Services, is complying with open data? And are there any data sets that we should request from DHS that are not currently public?
Thank you for that question, Chair. So DHS obviously is holding a lot of data with personally identifying information associated with it. And I think, we work with DHS to identify data sets that they've made public through their website or that would be appropriate for release on open data, including, potentially aggregated information. And we're happy to work with DHS to go through their regular process to certify that a data set is able to be published on open data without compromising any type of personally identifying information.
Well, they always use that, by the way. They said, oh, this would compromise with personal information. We're not asking for that. And they refused flat out to give me any information that, if let's say, for instance, I want a breakdown of how many homeless individuals are in my district or in a certain community board. And I want a breakdown of men, women, children, so I could address it. They won't give me that data. Now, how would, again, they just flat out refused. The commissioner himself has refused over and over again. Tell me why that's protected. Why would they have that as protective? Like they said, they said it's, we can't give that information out. Do you have any idea, Director?
I can't speak specifically to DHS's determination in these cases. We work closely with the Mayor's Office of Information Privacy, and I know the Mayor's Office of Information Privacy also works closely with agency privacy officers at agencies to make determinations on these types of requests. But I can't speak specifically to DHS's position.
Then nobody can answer this, because if I ask for data, and I've asked the mayor's office, and I've asked the commissioner of DHS, I've asked everyone. I just want numbers, not names, numbers. So how would that be protected? And could you demand that the agency turn over that information, your office?
We have the compliance process that we're able to leverage to work with agencies to try to identify, but ultimately we can't compel DHS to turn over information if DHS has made a determination that the data is potentially identifying.
So if the police department did that, so each agency then is not, they don't have to answer to anyone, not your office, the mayor's office. If they don't want to give the data, they don't give it. That's what you're saying?
Yes, the agency legal team and privacy officer, we have to abide by their determination about whether or not that data is personally identifying.
That's something we have to fix, because then, let's say the police department decided that they're not going to give information. And we're not asking for names, Director. We're asking for numbers. Tell me how that would compromise any privacy if I said I want to know how many men, women, and children that are homeless in my district, so I can open up shelters or I can get faith-based organizations. This doesn't make any sense. This is the commissioner just trying to play games, and that shouldn't be tolerated by any administration. So it's this is a big problem I've had for 4 years with this commissioner, and I'm just happy that we're getting a new administration to maybe get information that we could start addressing homelessness in my district and throughout the city. A lot of council members are asking this because they want to address it, and they don't want to just be told, here, you have to take this shelter, and it happens to be let's say a population of men when maybe we don't have that many men who are homeless in a certain district. So that's the reason I think they're withholding it, but that's another. So aside from DHS, what agencies are not really cooperating with open data or have been the most difficult with providing data sets?
Thank you for that question. And I think on the whole, we have wonderful open data coordinators at every agency and an office in the city, and they do great work trying to make sure that agencies and offices are in compliance with the NYC open data law. Specifically, I don't know that I could name an agency in this case, but we are.
You have no problems with any of the agencies, Director? Come on. Come on. Listen, I talk all the time with commissioners, and I mean, this is like, if you have problems with agencies and you'd like to see better cooperation, let us know. We're the oversight, right? That's what don't withhold information from the city council. If you feel,
I appreciate that.
No,
I appreciate that, Chair.
I'm telling this is my job, Director. So can you tell us what agencies are slower? Let's say what agencies could improve. Let's put it different. I'll put it a little differently. What agencies can be a little bit more cooperative with your office?
I could point you to the Open Data Dashboard, which is at nyc.gov/opendata/dashboard, which is our tool that we use to manage and measure the health of the program, with particular agencies. Our focus is always on supporting open data coordinators and improving their access to resources. And if we see at a particular agency or on a particular data set, if there have been delays or issues, we work with that agency to help them make sure that they're in compliance with the open data law.
Okay, so you don't want to name names. All right. Can we review, the city council review, which data sets were denied use? Certainly DHS, like, for instance, which I just mentioned. Can we review that when you asked the question and you weren't given that data because they invoked privacy or something else?
Every request for a data set is publicly logged in a data set on Open Data, which I realize is a little bit meta, but it is available. The data set is called Public Data Set Request. For data sets that were not able to be made public, the agency that owns that data is required to provide a public-facing justification as to why that data could not be shared. And in addition to reviewing these justifications and following up with agencies if needed, our first course of action when an agency receives a request for a data set that cannot be shared publicly is to work with that agency to explore if any portion of the data set could be released, even if the entire data set can't be.
Okay. What data sets do the general public and/or agencies reach out to Open Data to flag issues or improvements?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the most interesting aspects of the NYC Open Data Portal is that you can see which data sets are being accessed most frequently by members of the public. As you mentioned, the 311 data set is particularly popular, as well as many of the TLC data sets around for-hire vehicles. Those are the data sets that we see sort of the public using most frequently.
Other than the privacy issue that we mentioned before, what are the reasons agencies give for not being able to address issues, make improvements, or update their data sets?
That's a great question. The main reason why data is not able to be released is personally identifying information. There are a few other categories of reasons why data is maybe not able to be made public. Some of those include that it's deliberative, or, for example, MODA has a data set of the staff birthdays that is not subject to the open data law. generally speaking, the predominant and primary reason why a data set would not be able to be released is that it potentially is personally identifying.
But do you ever get a reason that they just don't have the personnel? The agency just doesn't have the personnel to gather the information, or they're very, very slow?
Yeah, so as part of the compliance process, agencies have to outline data sets that are eligible to be released and provide a timeline that they will be releasing that information on. That information is also available publicly on the Open Data website. And in the event that an agency has a data set that is to be released publicly and does not have adequate resources to release it in a timely manner, MODA and DoIT work closely with that agency to try and do everything we can to expedite and get data published as quickly as possible.
So which data sets overall and those flagged by agencies or the general public have unresolved issues and or pending improvements?
I'm not sure that I can speak to the exact number of data sets that have been identified for pending improvements, but that any public data request is available on the Open Data website. Al, did you want to add anything to this on this question?
I would add that there is also another data set where we track other inquiries that are coming in around questions. We call them data questions and errors. So that is also publicly available. So in addition to the public data set request. So all of that information and the responses are logged in a data set on the portal.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say we'd be happy to follow up with you after the hearing with specific numbers based on that data set.
So like, yeah, how many data sets that should be available on Open Data, but are not yet available? Do you have a number of those, or do you have any examples?
Yes. So as I mentioned before, we've expanded the compliance process to include a review of agency websites for any data sets that have been released publicly on agency websites that are not available on Open Data. And then we work with agencies to make sure that those data sets are structured and documented in a way that makes them releasable on Open Data. There are always data sets in the hopper. As we mentioned previously, there were 465 new data sets identified and published in this fiscal year, and I again would be happy to direct you and follow up afterwards with the specific data sets that are in the queue to be published and their timelines over the course of from this year's compliance process.
All right, I just have a general question. Could you please walk us through the process of receiving data from agencies? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm gonna maybe turn that over to Al to speak to.
Yep, so we receive data from agencies in a number of ways, but the primary ways that you'll see data published to the portal is our team working with agencies, and we accept data in a number of ways, connecting to agency databases, having them drop the files for us in some sort of a secure location, and sometimes through email. So we're very flexible in the way that we can receive data from agencies. So pretty much any way that they'd prefer to send us that information, for the most part, we can handle it.
And what data quality checks do data sets go through before being released to Open Data?
Well, we normally defer to the ODCs, the subject matter experts, for reviewing that information. We believe that there's no one who understands their data as well as they do. But we do provide guidance to Open Data coordinators for things that they should be looking for. We have a resource page that's available with guidance on publishing data, identifying data sets, everything that you can really think of. But at the end of the day, we do defer to the subject matter experts to do that Q&A. We think they're uniquely positioned to be able to do that.
So, like what data quality checks are performed on existing data sets on Open Data? Do you do that?
That is also something that ODCs keep track of. It always comes up again during the compliance process that goes throughout the year, but it's something that we encourage to happen on an ongoing basis throughout.
Yeah, and by the way, are data sets updated timely? Because Local Law 110 of 2015 requires that all data sets on the portal that are also available on the agency's website are updated within a certain period of time whenever the agency's website version of the data is updated. So has this been successfully implemented so far?
That information, we do track it, but we do again defer to our ODCs to make this information available to us. There are hundreds of available links on agency websites, but ODCs are responsible for maintaining that information, keeping track of what's being maintained. I believe the timelines are, if a data set is automated on the agency's website, we have to have it on the portal within 1 day, and we do try to automate all of those data sets. And for the ones that are manually updated, it's usually within 10 days. But again, we work with our open data coordinators to enable them to do that, to make sure that those, that synchronization is happening.
And if I may add, Chair, we do require that every data set include the frequency that data set is expected to be updated on open data. And again, the open data dashboard that we referenced earlier does show you which data sets are out of date to be updated according to their specified update frequency.
What would it take to expand the role of open data coordinators to involve more public engagement, better data documentation, and tool map design?
That's a great question. We love connecting open data coordinators with the users that are using their data sets. As a part of the compliance process, agencies do have to complete a certain number of civic engagement activities during the course of the year. And we work with open data coordinators to help facilitate that by having them host Open Data Week events or be a part of the Open Data Ambassadors program that I referenced in the testimony. We definitely support expanding resources within agencies to help their open data coordinators have more time and energy to devote to civic engagement and engagement with the public on their data sets. Chair, I'm afraid you might be muted.
I'm sorry, hit it by mistake.
Nope.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Sure.
How many employees are at MODA currently, and how many are focused on New York City open data?
MODA's open data staff is 2 full-time employees and a New York City service member. So we have 3 full-time employees, 2 of which are full-time city employees. The full complement of the MODA staff is approximately 10.
All right, so 2 really, right?
2 full-time city employees and a city service corps member.
Yeah, so but obviously the pandemic could have really had a huge impact on your office, right? So is there any increase in staffing planned?
We can always do more with more. We don't have current plans to expand the size of the open data team, and we're proud of what we've been able to accomplish with the dedicated staff, including Zachary, who's here with us today, and Malgosia Rainiak, our open data project manager. But yeah, we think that the open data program is doing amazing things, but we'd always be happy for additional staff.
No, I agree, but it's just that could we obviously, I think, improve it and just the speed of how things are posted, but just so we have more employees, because I don't think your office is staffed as it should be, but that's what we could talk about that in a future hearing. So I just want to bring up some follow-up questions to 2018. Which I know was a while ago, but in 2018, I brought up at the hearing the fact that there were numerous dead links on the open data portal in which there were links to data sets that provided no information. Has this issue been fixed at all or addressed?
Al, would you like to speak to that?
As far as I'm aware, there should be no dead links in the open data portal. One way that you can view that is looking at our data set asset inventory. which will highlight for you the 3,400 public data assets that are published by our team. Additionally, there are the ability to make views of public data sets. So I don't know if the thought is around those views that were in place, but even those views are connected to regularly updating data sets. So there should be no dead links to dead data sets on the portal at this time.
Maybe we'll hear from the advocates or so. People might say, I know I ran into a bunch of dead links in 2018. So if that's been fixed, I applaud you. And just a few other questions. In 2018, an advocate testified in favor of the idea of having hearing questions related to the release of public data sets inherent in each of the council's budgetary hearings to encourage more agency transparency with their data. Has this idea been implemented in any way or at least talked about?
I'm sorry, Chair, to clarify, the idea was that at each council committee hearing, there would be a specific question about open data sets related to the topic of that hearing?
Yeah, like in the council's budget hearings, to encourage more agency transparency with their data. So, related to the release of public data sets, I think that, it's a good idea. We could talk about it. We could talk about it some more. And again, so just in wrapping up, by the way, committee council, do we have any questions from our council members?
Currently, Chair, I do not see any questions from council members.
Okay, then I'll continue. Let's talk about the current initiatives. Could you list current initiatives? You might have mentioned that earlier, but could you just list the current initiatives that your office is engaged in currently? And it could be for both DoIT and MODA.
Sure. So some initiatives related to the open data program that I mentioned during our testimony is the establishment of an expansion of the Open Data Ambassadors program, which we're particularly excited about. We had done some pilot versions of this with the Queens Public Library System in 2019. It involves training city staff, library professionals, and members of the civic technology community to teach everyday New Yorkers about how to use open data. We recognize that, Open Data Week and a lot of the civic engagement might be reaching civic tech enthusiasts, but we also want to reach New Yorkers who maybe don't know yet what the potential is within the open data portal for them to answer questions or get their questions answered about what's going on in their communities. So we think the Open Data Ambassadors program is really, we're hoping that we're reaching a new audience with that program who might not otherwise know about open data. So that's I would say our major initiative within the open data program as well, but we're also working on improving the data documentation process, especially emphasizing readability and accessibility of open data documentation and metadata. And we're also actively planning for this year's Open Data Week. Proposals are open now for Open Data Week programming, and we encourage anybody listening to the testimony today to propose a session for Open Data Week 2022.
Well, just a general, comment. Is there any way to make open data more user-friendly? You might hear that today from some of the advocates.
Yeah, totally. That is always, again, our vision for open data is that open data is for all New Yorkers, not just New Yorkers, but are comfortable using Microsoft Excel already or are data fluent. So I think a lot of our initiatives and the focus of the work in our office is really on making open data as open and
easier.
Yes, exactly. And we're doing that in a lot of ways, and we work closely with the civic technology community and advocates, on making sure the priorities of our office and improving usability are aligned.
So just a few more questions. Could you tell us more about NYC Recovery Data Partnership to inform COVID-19 response and recovery efforts? And what is the end goal of the partnership?
Yes, the Recovery Data Partnership was started in response to the pandemic. City agencies and offices had questions about the state of the city's economic recovery, and we're looking for alternative data sets, maybe that were updated more frequently than administrative data, or had sort of more up-to-the-minute information about the city's recovery. We have worked with some incredible partners during the Recovery Data Partnership, including MasterCard, LinkedIn, Kinza. The full list of partners is available on the Recovery Data Partnership website. Those partners very generously donated their data to the city pro bono, and that data has been subject to a use case process where agencies need to document how they plan on using the data. All of those use cases are also available publicly on the Recovery Data Partnership website. And that data has been used to inform recovery efforts, to answer important questions about the city's fiscal outlook, and also help direct resources. And the Recovery Data Partnership will be winding down at the end of the year, but we're exploring and looking forward to potentially continuing to work with some of the partners that have been a part of the RDP going forward.
Okay, and one final question, unless my colleagues have some questions, but is there any data on who is downloading the data? For example, experts or the average citizen? Do we have data on that? I guess we do.
We have some information about who's using open data. This is a trade-off that, back to your point about the usability of the open data website, we've chosen not to require people to register or tell us specific information about themselves in order to use the open data portal. We want to make sure that there's no barrier to entry for any New Yorker to use the open data portal, but we do know that our major user groups include city staff. As I mentioned in my testimony, open data is actually one of the best and easiest ways for agencies to share information with each other. So agency staff are major users of the open data portal, along with researchers, academics, and students, as well as members of the public. So those are kind of our major user groups. But we don't have specific numbers about who's downloading.
But you don't have, do you have a survey? Do you have online surveys that people can fill out voluntarily?
We do ask when people send an open data help desk ticket or a request that they tell us a little bit about themselves, if they're a student, if they're a member of the public, if they're a city staffer. So we do get some of that information through the help desk tickets, which, as we mentioned, is about 1,000 per year. Zachary, do you want to speak to any other sort of survey efforts? I know that potentially there's some other efforts that have happened over time to understand the user base.
Yeah, I would just add that we had a survey leading up to the Open Data Week, or the Open Data Strategic Plan that we put together, and used that to inform the future direction of the Open Data Program and some of the initiatives that we're now focusing on.
Okay. All right, committee council, do we have any questions? I don't really see anybody's hands up, but.
I do not see
Okay.
any questions right now.
All right, so thank you both. Thank both agencies. Terrific job. Things are improving. We all admit it. Again, this is obviously very helpful for all, and certainly my office. We're hearing in my committee that I think both. I'm very, very happy with the progress of the open data, and things are improving, and certainly do it. I'm very close in working with the commissioner, and that again it does help us. There are some improvements in certain areas of 311 that I'm never going to stop working on, but other than that, I'm very happy with certainly the performances so far of both MODA and Do It. Thank you so much. Thank you, both agencies, and have a good holiday.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all for your testimony, and we'll now turn to the public testimony. I will be calling groups of panelists.
Oh, by the way, 1 second, if both agencies can have some representatives stay with us so we can hear the advocates and testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. So we'll now turn to public testimony. I will be calling groups of panelists. Once your name is called to testify, our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant at Arms will set the timer to announce that you might begin. We ask each panelist to limit their testimony to 5 minutes. Council members will have an opportunity to ask questions after each panel of witnesses. I will now would like to welcome our first panel to testify. Our first panelists are Professor Stefan Berlhust from GovLab, Noel Hidalgo from Beta NYC, Kay Mayer from Fontans Advisors, and Tom Speaker from reInvent Albany. Professor Berlhust.
Your time will begin. Thank you very much. And I also developed a presentation. I'm not sure whether I can share my screen, but that doesn't seem to be feasible. So I will just present an oral testimony then. Chair Holden, members of the committee, thank you so much for having me again. My name is Stefan Verhulst. I'm the co-founder of GovLab, and GovLab is an action research center here at New York University focused on how do we improve the way we make decisions in the public interest using new technologies. One area, obviously, is data. And within that context, we've done a lot of work on how do we unlock data through, for instance, open data in order to improve the way we make decisions in the public interest, including to improve the way we manage our cities. Now, within the context of our open data work, we have one initiative which is called the Open Data Policy Lab, where we work with cities, countries, and international organizations worldwide in order to democratize access to data. And within that context, we've done quite some work on thinking about how can we improve the value of data once made available, or how do we accelerate access to data in a way that can serve the public interest. And within that context, we developed recently a new initiative, which we call the third wave of open data, where we really try to focus on how do we build upon the previous waves, and by which we mean the first wave involving freedom of information, the second wave involving the release of an open data portal. How can we build upon that and actually accelerate the value of data and the investment made in those two earlier waves? Based upon that global consultation that we've held, including actors of New York City, we've identified 4 areas where open data initiatives can be improved upon or can build upon existing initiatives in order to increase the value. The first is to move from and build upon the notion of open by default to also become more publish with purpose oriented, by which we mean it's important to identify key purposes for which we need data and then make sure that those purposes are met. 2, to think beyond government data, especially within city context. And I've given testimony to this council in 2019, where I've also advocated for partnerships around data and include data that, for instance, resides within the private sector in order to leverage that data to improve the way cities work. 3, to really make sure that the release of data is coincides with putting data rights and data responsibility at the heart of open data. And then lastly, to really accelerate the use of data at a subnational level. What does that mean for New York City? Well, 4 areas can be initiated. 1 is to really democratize the purposes and the identification of the purposes for which we need open data for. We at GovLab have initiated something called the 100 Questions Initiative, where we are focusing not only on the 100 data sets that could be made available, but the 100 questions that matter to society, for which we need data and for which we could actually have a stronger accountability for making that data available as well. And in 100 Questions initiative in New York City would complement the efforts to make data transparent and understand what data we have, but we should also have an understanding what are the questions that New Yorkers and New York agencies need to have answered moving forward. Second area could be to really accelerate data collaboration in New York City. There was already mentions of the Data Recovery Partnership, which is really an excellent example on how the city can start leveraging data that was collected within the city for city purposes. But I think we really need to accelerate and complement the open data effort with additional data collaborations that can understand how the city works, not just based upon city data, but also based upon data that, for instance, the private sector collects as well. And there are examples worldwide how we can do this. Fourthly, we need to establish data stewards within the city and within the private sector. And that could include, of course, a chief data steward, which involves understanding what data is needed, for what purpose, and how do we then accelerate access to the data, including private sector data. And that requires a whole set of competencies currently perhaps not present. And then fourthly, we really need to also go beyond the city level and think in terms of boroughs and in terms of districts, and what's the role of open data that is collected within those kinds of more local environment, including communities as well. And so those are four elements that we believe could enable New York City, which is already a model worldwide as it relates to open data, enable it to access and enable the acceleration of the third wave of open data, building upon the previous waves, and really go and become the model for the world again. Thank you very much for the time you've given me today.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Aaron.
Chair, I apologize. Thank you very much for your testimony. And as you mentioned, if you have slides, please forward them to us. You can forward them to testimonies at council@nyc.gov. And you can also forward the slides to our committee as well. And our next panelist is Noel Hidalgo. And before we start with the next panelist, I would like to recognize that Councilmember Lander joined us.
Your time will begin.
Great, thank you. Professor, many of the things that you mentioned is actually what Beta NYC has been doing for the last 6 years. Would love to chat about that. But I will just dive into the good things that we've seen in the last few years. So for the last 3 years, Beta NYC has received over 200 research and data assistance requests. This is a free open data help desk to answer anyone's open data or technical questions. It's serviced by our Civic Innovation Fellows and Apprentices. And you can find out more about it on beta.nyc/radars. In the last 20 months and since the dawn of the pandemic, we've seen an explosive interest in our open data events. Particularly since April 2020, we've engaged over 1,600 people at any of our open data themed events. That's including our virtual open data week that we hosted and our open data office hours that we host. In March of this year, and over an 8-day span, as you heard from Moda, we supported over 150 events. It was a bit of a blur, and we hosted daily open data trainings, morning coffee hangouts with Moda and agency staff and open data coordinators, and helped each other more or less process the data behind the pandemic. Next year, in 2022, we are really excited to co-host Open Data Week, and we are currently looking for suggestions for sessions. It will be the 10th anniversary of the city's open data law, and we're really, really excited to do it in person if we can. So everyone wear your masks and stay vaccinated. Next year, we're also really excited to do this Open Data Ambassadors program, which you heard about. which is really an amazing partnership with public libraries, everyday New Yorkers, and city staff to learn how to speak open data to everyday situations. We all know that open data is a very technical language. It is a technical language not only in programmatically, but also in the language of government. And so we're training everyday New Yorkers to figure out like how to pull these things apart and how to walk into their neighborhoods and represent open data. And we're really, really excited because 10 years into the open data law that we have, we can see that the current that propels open data is getting stronger. In the past 10 years, we can definitely see that the scaffolding to support open data is well thought out, but it needs more technical resources. You directly heard that from the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. Agencies continue to share open data based upon how they record their data. And that's while we started it, it's now we're at a point where we need agencies to more or less make open data more useful, more or less start helping translate that open data into more useful terms. And we're still waiting for agencies to properly resource data analytics teams and dog food their own data. Before I run out of time with outlining the challenges, which I will submit to you, Council, so that way you have a very detailed list of the challenges, it is very clear that MODA needs more technical resources to pull data from agencies. Then we need those agencies to actually use their own data. They should not be sharing, also, MODA should not be sharing data resources with DoIT. MODA needs its own dedicated technical resources. We know that once data gets used, it identifies inconsistencies, and that helps improve data. For the next decade of open data, we definitely need the following. We need better metadata on the open data portal. We love the dashboard that MODA's created that helps us bring transparency to understanding how data sets are being updated, but it's clear that that whole system needs resources to be updated, and we're excited that MODA's going to put that at a prioritization. We need agencies to be using their own data from the open data portal because we know that this is how data sets will get cleaned. MODA needs its own technical support so that way they can not only help themselves, but then they can ultimately help other agencies. We need an updated technical standards manual. It is very shocking that we have not had it since 2018, since the legislation was passed. It's very frustrating. It actually raises many red flags, which I'm happy to answer as a question and as a follow-up. And lastly, we need transparency from DoIT. We know that they are purchasing services in the name of improving data flows across the city, but we don't exactly know how those purchases are being utilized. We need to know how they plan on supporting MODA and also how they envision digital transformation for all city agencies. We need to know how DoIT is also including the voices of users. And I'm not just talking about like everyday New Yorkers and how we use city technology. We need to hear how DoIT is including the voices of their agencies that they're supposedly sharing or servicing, excuse me. With that, I have many more technical things to get into and follow-up questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Noel. And our next panelist is Kay Mayer from Fontans Advisors.
Your time will begin.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, Chairperson Holden and members of the Technology Committee. I thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. My name is Kay Meyer. I serve as the Director of Industry Consulting for SAS U.S. government business. I've spent more than 27 years in government, most of that time with the state of North Carolina, leading data integration and analytics programs for our state agencies and policy leaders. And for the last 7 years with SAS, helping government organizations transform business using data integration and analytic solutions that enable evidence-based data-driven decisions. Our company, SAS, is the global leader in advanced analytics, and we were founded in government work, doing work with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We've spent decades supporting federal, state, and local government organizations, including a long partnership with New York City. As you've been talking today, the idea of open data is so important, and we find that digital transformation is a top-of-mind topic for governments across our country, as our citizens and our government leaders and our policymakers are both demanding and deserve trusted, reliable, timely access to cross-agency information and insights they need to make critical decisions. As many of you have mentioned, the data is often, the data we need to drive digital transformation is often siloed and isolated across city programs. And so the efforts to bring that data together are amazing. As a result, sometimes we still find challenges, however, in using this valuable and strategic resource to integrate and analyze when we have to address these increasingly complex challenges of creating safe and healthy and diverse communities. As mentioned, the pandemic of the last 2 years has highlighted the importance of efficient and ready access to data and the ability to act quickly based on the insights that data can provide. The challenges that people face in accessing, but perhaps more importantly, in understanding the data that's available, has created this defining point in the data journey for our governments. And while we applaud the efforts that y'all are taking with your open data portal, we'd suggest that there's even greater value that can be achieved as the city looks to integrate and analyze these data sources, not only for the public's use, but also to support the internal city's efforts to improve policy and operational kinds of decisions. SAS has helped address these kinds of challenges by partnering with government to enable data management strategies that support those meaningful insights for strategic, tactical, and policy decisions. In the state of North Carolina, we've partnered with that government to provide integrated criminal justice data across the full range of justice and public safety ecosystems to increase citizen safety and to improve outcomes for justice-involved individuals. We've supported New Jersey's opioid and illicit drug crisis response by combining crime and forensic lab, death and overdose, and prescription drug data to help the state identify hotspots and allocate critical resources accordingly. And even here in New York City, we've supported, in the state of New York, we've supported, among other things, data and analytics for the state's AIDS initiative, as well as working with the city's Department of Finance on tax simulations and property valuations. And we've learned that as you use this data, not just for the open data portal, but also to support internal government business, there's a lot of work that can be done by building government transformation through continuous and active engagement with the business and community stakeholders, but most importantly, by building a framework of trust that focuses on collaboration and sharing while ensuring the protection and privacy of the data. We'd welcome the opportunity to participate with your organizations in helping integrate that data and provide more holistic understandings, both to your internal agencies and departments, as well as to your public. If there's any questions that I can answer, or if there's additional information I can share, I'm available to do that. And we're honored to be here today and hope that as you continue along your data journey, you'll reach out to SAS for support as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Chair Holden, I understand that you have some questions.
Yes, I have some, by the way, three very good panelists. We're going to get to the, I just want to ask the three individuals that gave terrific testimony. Thank you very much. Professor, I want to ask you about your ideas on partnerships. Could you give us an example of a partnership that might succeed in New York City that we could learn from?
Yeah, there are many options and opportunities here. And actually, we worked 2 years ago with New Lab, which is based here in Brooklyn, to try to identify how can we leverage, for instance, data that was collected through sensors that startups had placed in downtown Brooklyn. How can we start using that for answering a variety of questions, such as, for instance, what's the impact of construction on business? What's the impact of a whole range of, for instance, changes in mobility on how people go about their daily lives? How do we use sensors to understand, for instance, the quality of garbage pickup and so on? And so all of that data is already being collected, but it's just not shared in a way that indeed is trusted, but also can actually start answering some of the questions that really are important for managing the city. And so that's just a few examples that can be established. Now, worldwide, and including in the US, there are a whole range of initiatives trying to do that, where they try to have access to, for instance, better energy data to understand how the city operates from an energy efficiency point of view, or how you, for instance, work with car sharing companies to understand mobility patterns and how that can be improved. So there's a whole range of opportunities. Again, the data recovery partnership is, from my point of view, the right step forward, but we need to accelerate that, and we need to also learn the lessons of that recovery partnership on what were the pain points and how can we do this for other areas beyond COVID-19.
Great, thank you, Professor. And we do have to talk more often because you have terrific ideas, and we're honored by your presence, by the way. Thank you so much for testifying. And Kay Meyer, can I ask you a question on, because obviously you're mentioning other cities and states. So what are you seeing in other cities as it pertains to open data? What cities really have it down and are providing great information?
Well, I think we're seeing open data initiatives moving forward across the country. I'm not sure if I could highlight for you specifically which organizations are doing the best in terms of publishing data to the public for public consumption. I would say that we are seeing a number of organizations that are taking this effort of providing a more enterprise approach to accessing their data for internal support for their agencies and policy decisions. For example, the City of Buffalo has just recently begun an initiative for a data analytics center for the City of Buffalo, which will focus on integrating data all across city organizations, both to drive internal change and transformation, as well as to make better data available to the public. As I think the professor has mentioned, the idea of more holistic insights to the data is so important. We often try to answer a question and we use individual data sources that give us one viewpoint or one perspective into the business challenge. What we're seeing is states and cities trying to bring a more integrated approach or a more holistic view. So I may need information about demographics, but also social service programs, housing information, health information, to bring a holistic picture to the challenge that I'm trying to solve. So take homelessness, for example. I not only need to know the numbers of the populations, I need to know where they're located. I need to know the resources that are available to them in terms of education and housing and potentially even substance use disorder services, behavioral health services, those sorts of things. It's a holistic problem, not just the issue of housing.
Right, and that's what, I can't get basic information from the Department of Homeless Services, and we're trying to address it, but they're really not letting us. And that's the biggest, and that sort of leads into the, why does the city have that, just can control that, or that agency, that particular agency. You heard that from the director saying that they could just refuse, and we honor that. The agency can refuse to give us information. So I can't get I can't get what Kay, we just mentioned. I can't get basic information. I'm not asking for names. I'm not asking for even addresses. I'm not asking for what neighborhood they're. I'm asking just numbers, and that's basic. I could ask for more. And I would, and what services are being, given to them. For instance, an employment shelter, how many people are employed, they'll give us a general number. And then I ask for other information, they don't want to give it. Like what kind of jobs, where are they going? Where are these men given employment, and how long, how long is the employment? You don't get basic information. So I thank you for that. And I just want to go to Noel Hidalgo. Because he mentioned he's got some red flags in the data dictionary or manuals. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so in the testimony that I'll send you, I have outlined some current challenges. The very first one is the technical standards manual. Next is inconsistent automation, not enough oversight, the timeliness of data releases, and data quality issues. Those are the really big buckets of the current challenges that we see for the next 10 years. The technical standards manual was something that we fought really, really hard for in the initial open data law. It was our first attempt to decouple essentially the very technical aspect of what is government data and normalizing it and translating it in a way that we can understand, and we as the public can understand how data would essentially be released from agencies and then put to the open data portal. It codified kind of like what is the tricolor of what are the data that an agency has that essentially would be that it won't share because it has personal identifiable information. What data does it have that contains some sensitive information that would need to be sanitized? And then what is stuff that it's already publishing on its website that it could easily, essentially flip the switch and put it onto the open data portal. The TSM was our first major attempt to help kind of translate the data that agencies had to get to the open data portal. So we got a TSM when the open data portal went live, and Andrew Nicklin and the team at DoIT and the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics did their best to really give us, give us the public what we were asking for. And then in 2017, when we got the open data law standardized, it was supposed to be updated every 2 years. And in somewhere between 2016 and 2017, it ended up becoming a GitHub a website where we could comment on it. We could also track the changes that were being made from year after year after year, because the TSM was supposed to be a living document, right? It's supposed to be something that can change. It just needs to be sent over to council and the mayor's office every 2 years. But since 2018, we've only had it as a PDF. The GitHub repo that existed on DoIT's GitHub webpage has disappeared. Actually, all open source repositories that DoIT once had on GitHub have vanished. We don't know where they are. We don't know why DoIT has pulled all of the open source GitHub repositories, but they're all gone. What we do have left is the remnant of a prior to 2018 TSM sitting on a GitHub pages. And we can comment on it, but it's an old version. So why do we want to comment on the old version when we know that there's a newer version, 2018? And I just want to say this very clearly. Pulling GitHub repositories, public open source repositories from your government GitHub page is not how government should be operating in the 21st century. And it really makes me question what is going on at DoIT and why are they pulling GitHub repositories when those things are supposed to be out for the general public to be using. So.
Okay, I believe I'll go back to committee council. If you guys can stick around, just some of the three individuals that just testified. I think we have one more person to testify.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Chair. Our final panelist is Tom Speaker from reInvent Albany.
Good afternoon, Chairman Holden and members of the Committee on Technology. My name is Tom Speaker, and I'm a policy analyst for reInvent Albany. reInvent Albany advocates for transparent and accountable government in New York State. We were instrumental in drafting and passing New York City's 2012 open data law and subsequent amendments. Thank you for holding this oversight hearing today. Thanks to the leadership of the City Council, New York City passed the world's first open data law, and our success and failures are closely watched by governments everywhere. Today, in the last month of the 8-year de Blasio administration and on the cusp of a new mayor and city council entering office, reInvent Albany's testimony will highlight 8 points. First, it is essential that the city council continue to hold this annual oversight hearing and look for ways to continuously improve the New York City open data program. The council has actively worked to increase the transparency, accountability, and effectiveness of the city's open data efforts by passing legislative mandates. Second, the success of New York City government open data depends on public interest and pressure. New York City leaders and career management have not fully realized the operational and efficiency benefits that open data offers, and some actively hoard their public data and keep it from the public, other agencies, or even their own agencies. Reporting mandates like the annual compliance plan, data dashboard agency audits, are essential to compel agencies to comply with the open data law. Third, having a mayor's office of data analytics is generally a good idea, and especially important to the success of open data. Officials in the mayor's office have clout and access to deputy mayors that the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications does not. We hope the Adams administration has a robust MOTA. Fourth, despite almost a decade of experience and a real investment of time and talent, New York City government has barely begun to reap the benefits of open data. By far the most expensive part of creating an agency data set is gathering data. Once the data set is created, publishing that data is cheap. And once the data is published, an infinite number of users can benefit from it. It is simply stunning to hear agencies complain about the time and effort needed to publish data in the open data portal, since publishing data for broad use probably costs 0.5% or less of what gathering and maintaining the data does. To use a paper analogy, it's like taxpayers paying an agency to create a phone book of city services and then printing one copy and sticking it on a bookshelf in some manager's office. Fifth, the mayoral transition between the Bloomberg and de Blasio administration almost destroyed New York City open data. MOTA had to be rebuilt from scratch, DoIT was adrift, and many agencies defaulted to ignoring the requirements of the open data law. We hope this committee and city council can help New York City government avoid this when Mayor Eric Adams takes over. Sixth, MOTA and DoIT are struggling to get agencies to fulfill basic aspects of the open data law. According to the Open Data Dashboard, only 59% of data sets are updated on time, and only a third of data sets scheduled for publication in the last 12 months have been available on time. Yes, COVID has been hard for everyone, but this performance is unacceptable and shows that almost a decade in, complying with the open data law has not been institutionalized by agencies. Seventh, we believe the key to sustainable open data is automating data sets so that agencies do not have to update data by hand. Our understanding is that DoIT has struggled to automate data sets. You should keep a close eye on data set automation, as it is the key to making open data cost-effective and sustainable. Finally, you can think of open data as the canary in the coal mine of New York City government's information architecture. Agencies that are good at managing their data do not have much trouble publishing data to the open data portal. That said, it is totally unclear to us whether high-level New York City managers and IT managers understand that a highly functioning open data system would save the city huge amounts of time and money and foster much more sophisticated and widespread data analytics. To this end, we suggest that you and the Adams administration take a close look at DoIT's new nearly $200 million contract that includes a redesign of DataBridge. This could be a huge opportunity to automate the flow of agency data to the public open data portal. At a minimum, it is a great chance for MOTA to rationalize New York City data management. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your testimony. Chair Holden, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Tom. By the way, I just want to talk about the data automation that you're saying that DoIT is lacking in that. I'd like to talk to the commissioner about that. Could you give me any more information, like the cost of, or how do you find out if they're, the fact that they're not implementing or they're not automated as well as they should be?
I don't have many specifics on hand, but we can follow up and send you more shortly.
Yeah, like what investment? I mean, I guess I'll get it from her as to how we could streamline this. And there we should identify, and I have my favorite agency that's lacking. I mentioned DHS. Does anybody on the call, any of the advocates or anybody who testified, have a particular problem with the information, the data that a city agency is putting out? Like, so for instance, it's much of it is outdated because we've seen, our staff has seen some outdated information. But can anybody on this in this hearing identify an agency that's most lacking? Because I couldn't get that from the director. Does anybody?
Chair Holden, I would love to just hop in real quickly.
Yes.
When we're working with MOTA to help build open data classes and kind of like use open data for community board or borough president's needs, they have a very robust tech support system where you can submit when you find errors within the data set. What was brought up in our testimony, as well as in Moda's testimony, is this open data dashboard. And so I think before talking to the DO-IT commissioner, it's important to sit with Moda and have a really clear understanding of what are the issues that are represented within the open data dashboard. I'm really excited to hear the work that they're looking to do, particularly around cleaning up the metadata that's in the open data dashboard, because many of the data sets are presented, and I wish Zachary was still around. Oh, I see that Zachary's here. Maybe I should just ask Zachary to talk about like how he explained how they're planning on cleaning metadata, because we're at a point where two people can't go through all of the data sets to clean up the underlying data sets that we're or the dashboard that we're trying to hold agencies accountable. So the first thing is, one is that agencies need to be held directly accountable in budget hearings. The agency commissioners need to be able to speak to why they're not investing in publishing open data. Moda and DO-IT can't be held accountable for every single agency's inaction. And two, like what we're hearing from just kind of like from agencies is that there's a lot of back and forth. We love Albert, we love the DO-IT team that's been working and automating the data sets, but there's a missing tool that Tom brought up. So it's this thing called DataBridge. We've been fighting hard to get DataBridge. DataBridge is essentially a warehouse where agencies can essentially pipe their data into that can then go to the open data portal. What we've heard is that there is the DO-IT has asked for IBM to do an emergency contract, an emergency COVID contract at a number of like $200 million. It started off small, $50 million has now ended up to be $200 million. And they've thrown a bunch of things into this emergency services contract. One of the things in this emergency services contract is rebuilding DataBridge, which is something that Amin has asked for. I mean, Mike Flowers was asking for this back in the Bloomberg administration. So there is a huge opportunity to take an emergency services contract, which has been stated to rebuild DataBridge, which will ultimately help us get to where we want to be with open data sharing. But from what we understand is that that's not being clearly communicated, that this is something that's out there, and agencies aren't necessarily working to improve this opportunity or latch onto this opportunity. So my advice is find out what's going on with this DataBridge contact, and two, speak to Martha and her team to have a really clear understanding of the open data dashboard to figure out what's wrong with the current automation process.
Right, and by the way, I wasn't blaming Moda or DO-IT. I do blame the agencies for not, like you said, for not providing the information or keeping it secret, or having, but I think automation is the key here that Tom mentioned, and certainly, getting to the bottom of that. That's my after this hearing, I'm going to talk to the commissioner of DO-IT about how we get to that point and how we make it more efficient. But certainly two full-time staff members at Moda is not enough. I think we all can agree. But so I'll ask anyone, are there any issues with open data that have yet to be mentioned at this hearing that you'd like to bring up? Okay.
Chair, I'm happy to reiterate and also respond to your question with regard to how do we even assess where weaknesses in the system might reside and how we can ultimately try to work towards maximizing the value of open data. And from my point of view, and again, reiterating what I mentioned, not all data is built and created equal and has the equal value. And in order to understand to what extent can you maximize the value of the data that is made available, or ensure that the data that is valuable is made available, if not made available, is to really reflect on what are high value data sets that should be made available, but are not being made available. And in order to assess that, we need to not only focus on high-value data sets, but on high-value questions that could enable the city to govern itself better, or it could enable residents and citizens of the city to make and improve the decisions that they have to make on a daily basis. And I think having an effort to really identify the high-value questions will enable better accountability to ensure that then the high-value data sets at least are being made available. Because quite often what we see, and again, I'm not using New York City as an example, but I'm using other cities and other open data initiatives, there's quite often, anyway, the metric is quite often the volume of data, not the quality and the value of the data. And I think we really have to shift evaluation of open data beyond volume and really start looking into, do we get the value and the valuable data sets from the data initiative?
Yes, and it's very important, but I want to go back to identifying the agencies that most need this and to improve the quality of life of certainly New York City residents and actually to save money. You know, just observing around my district today, coming into work, I saw these traffic counters that DOT is using, the wire across the streets, which is, I mean, that was used 50 years ago, and they're still using it. So we got to implement GIS. We have a lot of things to accomplish, but even when they, like the professor mentioned, or all the everyone that testified today, we have the data, and sometimes we don't know how to interpret it or use it to our benefit. And putting enough personnel behind it to get this information out to the public and to get it out to agencies, obviously. But Noel, do you want to add something? I believe.
Yeah, it's actually also to help the professor extend his narrative, is that we have a huge opportunity to revisit the MMR under the next, under Mayor Adams. And currently the MMR is produced on an annual basis, and there's a lot of number crunching that goes into the MMR. One of the continuous threads that we've had throughout the 10 years of advocating for open data is that we want the MMR really to be powered by open data. And so we would be able to clearly see, how are agencies performing, how are issues happening. And I think, as you talk to the mayor-elect and fight for the things that the technology committee oversees, is to push. And Mayor-elect Adams is a huge dashboard guy. He's famed to be he's going to be the first programmer mayor that the city has ever seen. He did COBOL programming at the police department. He helped come up with CompStat. There's a huge opportunity to really push to make the MMR responsive and have it baked on top of open data, which will ultimately, once again, once we get open data being used, we'll be able to find the inconsistencies and therefore improve the data sets. And so if you want to latch on to making agencies use their data and improve that data and have it automated, the MMR is like the cornerstone here that we can really set and then build everything moving forward to the next decade.
Thanks, Noel. Anybody else? Any other points? Okay, back to committee council.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank all panelists for their testimonies. And if we have missed anyone who has registered to testify today and has yet have been called, please use the Zoom raise hand function. And I currently see none. And I want to turn over to Chair Holden for any closing remarks and to adjourn the hearing.
So this is, thank you all. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you to the agencies that are still on, and I thank them for staying. I just want to thank our committee counsel, Irene Bohovsky and Charles Kim. They're wonderful, and they're going to be in touch with you, the advocates, and because we certainly need you in New York City. You're very valuable. Noel and I talk a lot, and we you know, he has so many terrific ideas. So, and volunteers like he said earlier about with the community boards. I was a member of a community board for 30 years, and they're lacking in technology, certainly, and the city doesn't provide enough resources. And Noel jumps in when he can and does so much work. His organization, Beta NYC, amazing work. And they volunteer with, you know, in the community board area and so many more. So I want to thank you all. Terrific. And you know, we have a lot of work to do, but thank you so much for your testimony and all the, and by the way, Director Norick, thanks for staying on. That's rarely done in New York City. I know the DUIT Commissioner does it also, but in the other hearings that I'm on, mostly the administration doesn't stay on. So I thank you and DUIT for listening and staying on. Thanks so much. Great holiday, everyone. Enjoy. This hearing is adjourned.